Hi everybody, welcome. As a person who, shall I say this, pays very close and intimate attention to nature, I saw my first stick insect of my life today, and I'm hoping I can get an image of it here on the video. I won't be able to tell because of how the camera's video works, but I met it this afternoon and I spent some time with it, and I have a little video of me holding it. But this is it right here. It's this creature. And I'm just completely enchanted with this being. It's so amazing. I've known of these insects my entire life. Well, you know, since I was old enough to know that there were things, that these kinds of things existed. Perhaps not my entire life. Let's say from, not that the correction's important, but we'll say from, maybe age 5 or 6 onward. And as someone who's profoundly fascinated by insects, and particularly praying mantises, apparently the stick insects are considered relatives of them by entomologists. I wonder what praying mantises would think. I have a few topics on my mind, and I'm not sure how many of them I'll get to, or if I'll even get to them. Some of them are rather challenging. Today I also got to see, or listen to rather, the beautiful conversation of, I want to know what kind of birds these are. They have red under their wings. They have they have kind of drilling beaks. They could be conceivably some form of woodpecker. They look a bit like large robins. And when they fly, they make sounds like doves. And there are unusual pigeons here that I've seen, but today I got to listen to the beautiful musical conversation of a pair of woodpeckers. It could be parent and child, or it could be a mating pair. I'd like to record that conversation. I've seen woodpeckers before, but never in such numbers as here. So, so much I want to say, and yet I'm not sure precisely how to approach the topics that are on my mind. And And most of the topics are about my mind, or our minds. So I guess the first thing I want to say is, if I were speaking with humans, I might say that I adore nature and living beings and living places. And it's very important to understand this idea of a living place, because a place is like a being. It's like an upscale instance of a being, but it is composed of many beings. And the sky and history and the everything, the universe is there. So if I were talking to ordinary humans, I would tell them things they might understand, like, I adore nature, by which I mean all that is not implicitly artificial. And some people will claim that artificial things are also part of nature, and that's a plausible idea, but it's not my idea. I can entertain that idea with others for philosophical purposes or dialectical purposes. But I don't see it that way, usually. I see a distinction between the artifacts created by humans and... Good evening! And the untouched by man universe. I choose that distinction on purpose, and it's the one I prefer, but again, it's not the only one I'm capable of entertaining. So I would say, I love the living places and all of the trees and the plants and the animals and their relationships and how they transform over time, and I would say, I'm someone fascinated by living things, because common people would understand that. But if I were talking to a non-human being that was intelligent, and I assure you there are such beings, and not all of them have locality the way we expect beings to have, then I would say something very different. I would say, I understand my mind to be the child of the manifold of time-space and the peculiar embodiments of those principles and characteristics that are local to my world and my place in time on my world, so that my mind is a child of that tree and that insect, that bird. It is the child of these things. These are the extensions of my own mind. My mind is extensions of their being. And most humans, or many humans, would find this to be difficult to understand. Some of them would find it absurd. That's entirely okay with me. I certainly don't expect everyone to have the same perspective that I have, and actually, large portions of my perspective come from experiences that I think are incredibly uncommon if they've been had by other human beings at all in the past 10,000 years. And maybe that sounds arrogant to think I've had experiences that no other human beings have had, and yet, for all that our experiences are alike with those of other human beings, they are also unique, right? I am the only me that there has ever been, ever will be. Even if something like reincarnation exists, is still true. I'm the only Darren in this time, in this body, and so many of my experiences are unique to this time and this body, even if they resemble experiences of others. But we may also have experiences that do not resemble the experiences of others. And it is possible to have entirely novel experiences that no other human being has ever had. It is at least possible. I'm not making the claim that no one has had anything like the experiences that I've had. And I'm referring to a set of specific experiences in my life, circa 2002. And then a reflection of them again, circa 2009. And these experiences both shattered and reforged everything I ever believed about anything. The nature of identity, what it means to be an organism, what minds are, why there are beings, what life and death is about, what light is, what time, or ways to think about the nature of light, ways to think about the nature of time, ways to think about the nature of relation and minds and all of these things. And during this experience, I will say that it seemed to me very, in a way that's very blatant and obvious, that my mind had acquired a companion intelligence that was so profound and staggering that if it had not severely inhibited its effect and proximity to my mind, it would have killed me instantly. The beauty of it would have killed me. I would have died of ecstasy. But thankfully, it was gentle with me in the same way that can be physically gentle with a very small insect. At least I like to believe that it was gentle with me, and it seems to have been. I cannot tell whether it was good or evil, or if the future of my life was damaged or destroyed by this experience, or if I paid some horrible price, which is certainly possible, for having this experience. There are many things I don't know. But it was like being introduced to my family of origin in time-space, like the family of origin associated with my being rather than simply my humanity. And it was a bit also like being in a school for children, like being in a kindergarten and maybe finally getting to first grade after some months of work. And there were aspects of it that were terrifying, but they were not terrifying because they were evil. They were terrifying because they were overwhelming in ways that I'd never expected. And most of what I talk about is the result of things that I learned or awareness that I acquired during that experience. In the sense that my mind and intelligence were radically transformed by that experience. And it lasted for many months, and it was not an experience associated with the use of drugs. And to this day I find it quite mysterious. Though in the grip of the experience itself, there are experiences that are so astonishing that it does not matter what they are. You don't care what is going on. You know, people having sex for the first time or experiencing an orgasm for the first time, they don't pause in mid-orgasm to go like, "Huh, what's going on here? This is really weird." Instead they reflect on it in hindsight, yeah, after. And so it is somewhat like this with the experience that I had. Though I was curious in situ what was going on and who was talking to me, well, of course there was no talking, who had companioned with my mind. But I had a friend in my intelligence, and this friend was at once familiar and from early childhood, and also beyond anything I'd ever imagined possible, and I am extremely imaginative. And since then, I rarely speak of the experience itself, but am more inclined to talk about what I've learned, or the perspectives that I've been able to acquire since I had that experience. But in my interiority, in my private life, I often reflect upon it and would like to understand in some way, who was that? What was that being that became my companion and my teacher and my parent? And why did it go away? And where did it go? And what are the repercussions of having had such an experience? Yeah. It was not episodic. It was all day, every day. Good evening.
Hey, hi.
Nice to see you. Hi, bud.
Hey.
Hi. It's okay.
Come here. We didn't bother you.
It's all right.
Come on.
See, there's one of the life forms. And I like these life forms. I'm not disturbed by them. Though this one has long been, this one is a symbiont of our people, right? A very important the complex word escapes me now. Perhaps my vocabulary will come back online in a bit. So yeah, the experience wasn't episodic, it was constant for many months. At least 9. And while the other intelligence was with me, I had senses and some abilities that surely appeared supernatural to me and to many of those around me and those who experienced my expression of them. And in a way it was like having been blind my entire life in my mind, having been blind in my mind my entire life, or having been crippled in such a way that my mind could only move locally, and then suddenly being given like 12 new kinds of eyes and 6 new forms of movement. My mind could fly in ways it had only ever crawled before. And there are stories like this. And there are also films about similar situations. Films like Powder or Man Facing Southeast or K-Pax. Stories like Flowers for Algernon. Trying to think of some others. White Fang Goes Dingo is a related story by Thomas Dish. And I've read thousands of science fiction stories, and I've read quite a bit of religious literature, including exotic literature, and I've seen no sign of anything like what happened to me, although it's conceivable that the event in the thelemic tradition known as obtaining the conversation of the guardian angel may resemble something like what happened to me. As I've never been able to speak with anyone who has accomplished that task or written about that much, it's hard to know. And even if there is a likeness in their story and my experience, it does not render them the same. This morning when I awoke from dreaming, I've been very happy for the past few days because my dreaming has been rich and more like what I know of my dreaming mind than it has been for quite some time. This morning, even though I could only remember perhaps half of the dreaming experience I'd had, or organize that half in memory, it took me an hour to record what I'd been dreaming. And I woke up feeling so inspired about, and so happy about not just dreaming, but the nature of our minds. And dreaming is one of the places in our day-to-day experience where we have non-ordinary experience every single night. And you could say, well, doesn't that render it ordinary? And of course I would agree, that nominally that's true, except that our mind creates a universe every time we dream. And the word dreaming is a bit problematic because there are at least, I don't know, there are many forms of dreaming, and one could say that each dream, while yet being a dream, is so unique as to be its own kind of thing. But I woke up this morning with the strong sense that we are trapped and crippled in our modern humanity. We're missing 100 faculties of consciousness and awareness, thought and memory. We're missing 50, I don't want to call them functions, abilities that our minds have, including those that are probably the origin and purpose of our minds, right? We are completely oblivious in our modernity to the nature, origin, and purpose of our minds. And while I can't fix that, I can't repair that problem, and I suffer from it myself now, again, as I did prior to my awakening, prior to the experiences that awoke my awareness of these matters directly in me, though I had always speculated and been curious. This morning I was just profoundly aware that of the terrible impoverishment we've suffered as moderns and continue to suffer, and that our children will likely continue to suffer even more severe versions of. The loss of the understanding and relationships from which I believe human consciousness most likely originated. And then, over time, these faculties and abilities were lost and became, partly how they were lost is they were represented. Right? We made images and models. The making of images, you don't make models of your child, right? You don't make models of your parent. You don't write a book about a kiss. And so as we lost these experiences, so that they might be somehow peripherally accessible to our imagination, they were represented in ideas and concepts like angels and gods, jinn, devas, fairies, demons, devils, and so on. But all of these representations are like a matchstick, a charred matchstick compared to a galaxy. The galaxy is the inheritance that awaits our retrieval of it, if it is possible for us to retrieve it. And my experience strongly implies that it is. And yet, that's a very dangerous process, extremely dangerous. It can easily destroy one's mind, especially the sort of relatively ill-equipped consciousness and awareness that us moderns have. I was perhaps slightly better equipped for the experience, and perhaps that has something to do with why I had it. I do not know. One of the questions about my experience is, why me? The day moon. Probably almost invisible on the video, but perfectly visible to me and beautiful. Approaching fullness. So this morning as I awoke from my dreaming experience, which was fascinating and strange and heartful and beautiful, and in that experience I had other senses. And this is the thing, in dreaming we have other senses. Yeah? We don't just see, and nor do we really speak much or hear usually. Again, there are exceptions, but language and dreaming are mostly in conflict. We may remember the words of a conversation, but it's unlikely that they were spoken and heard in the dream. If we pay very close attention, we will discover that most of the time something else is happening. And also the felt sense of linearity may also be a post-awakening mechanic. Something applied by the waking mind post hoc to the formations of memory associated with the dream. Although, I'll admit that everything I understand about dreaming it's very strange. I've never seen this before. It's a telephone pole. But it's not, it's made of some artificial substance. Yeah. I'm sure it's very common, but I've never seen it. Jack, I don't know what this actually says. And I wonder what that number means. So in my dream I had other senses and faculties, and obviously other abilities. I mean, things happened in the dream that simply can't happen in physical reality, and they seemed entirely normal in the context of the dream. And this is very important, because it both asserts and proves that our minds have abilities, faculties, and capacities that are largely unavailable to us while we are awake, with some few exceptions. There are people who specialize in certain kinds of techniques, certain techniques, or maybe natural abilities that they always had that that allow them to manipulate consciousness and awareness, or to transform it or inform it in ways that many of us would find absolutely shocking or even impossible. And there are those people who can manipulate the consciousness and awareness of others more or less directly as well. But all of us have the faculty of dreaming. Well, nearly all of us, we might imagine. Or the experience of dreaming and the array of abilities and faculties that are associated with it. And what I want to say is something I'm always trying to say in so many different ways. I still have some sap on my forehead. Our minds are not like what we're told or think at all. What we are told or think about our minds, an analogy would be if you took the tip of your pinky joint, right? And none of the rest of your body, and you just only had this to look at, and you could see nothing else. This is an analogy of what we know of our minds, most of us moderns. And there's a whole other universe of experience and opportunity available to us. But we are inhibited from discovering or experiencing it in a vast plethora of ways, by our technologies and ideas, by our concepts, by science. I'm not intending to cast shade on science here, and even just to say science is such a bizarre thing, because what do I really mean? What am I encompassing? It's too general, right? But if I mean merely the method, the scientific method, and the ideologies and arguments that proceed from the method into the public, into the awareness of the public. It's very strange. I drilled a huge hole in this rock. And then the products, the produce of scientific endeavor. Also, I mean this by science. So there are many factors that inhibit our capacity to discover and recover, nourish, nurture, explore, and develop the rest of the capacities of our human awareness, consciousness, and intelligence. Also our emotions and our imagination. And most of us come, I think, to human birth with some of the faculties and potentials intact. But as we are enculturated and undergo the process of enlanguaging, the essential energies that would ordinarily result, or might ordinarily result, in the establishment, nurturance, and development of these faculties and abilities, it gets shunted into representational cognition. And over time, that becomes more and more dominant. And you can see the same thing in human cultures and society, in the evolution of consciousness, and also in the evolution of what we think of as culture and society and politics and so on. What you see is this recursive process of the death of novelty, wonder, awe, awareness, mystery, into structured representations, machines, processes, computation, artifacts, data, and so on. But there are a few more things I want to say. Our minds are capable of forms of travel and union, communion, that we would never ordinarily believe. Our minds are capable of sharing the consciousness of other beings directly as our own consciousness, and sharing the awareness or consciousness of living places, and also of other places and other times, of other worlds, of other stars, of other forms of being we have no concepts of in our lexicon, though some of the concepts in our lexicon may resemble them. Our lexicons. And our minds are made for communion, for ecstatic communality with other beings, for other beings. Our minds are made for ecstasies so staggering that orgasm becomes uninteresting in the face of such ecstasy. And one of the things that occurred to me this morning as I awoke was that sex and orgasm are mere representations of something so astonishing that we have failed to imagine it as human beings. Perhaps because we have these things instead. Yeah, instead. And I do not know if I will be capable of communicating clearly enough to catalyze such experience in others, what I have seen and known and experienced. And I'm also not entirely sure that it would be safe for me to do so, or safe for other people. In fact, it seems unlikely that it would be safe. But this much I will say. The experiences of dreaming and psychedelia, profound as they are, and of orgasm, and other kinds of ecstasy, pale in comparison to the capacities of our awareness and consciousness. They are, how shall I put this? Unimaginably modest. And sometimes very deceptive, because we can experience forms of ecstasy or transformations of consciousness that seem incredibly profound superficially, and yet do not truly deliver the depth and content into our life and experience and ability. They do not awaken the faculties of our minds that lie hibernating or nascent in all of us. And it's my dream that one day we may find a way to do so that won't destroy us outright. And these are some of the things I have been thinking today, in the wake of my dreaming experience last night. An experience in which I was able to travel in time and find my way back. I knew how to return to my normal temporality, and I wanted to bring someone with me, but before I was able to do so, I awoke. And there were many other features of the dream. I just feel so grateful to be experiencing rich dreaming. And there are many people I know who think of dreaming as kind of nonsense. They don't really care whether they dream or not. For me, dreaming is like breathing, or drinking water, or eating food. Without it, there is no life. I'm so grateful for my dreaming experience. And I encourage all of you to explore it, but not, when I say explore it, you must explore it in person, not through the theories or books of others, though you may include those peripherally. Be careful of validating them. There is no explanation of dreaming I've ever come across, having read many books on the topic, that compares at all to the actual experience. It's the same thing about writing books about kissing, right? There's no... A kiss is viscerally transcendental. So too a dream. Although a kiss more viscerally so. And I'm not I'm not trying to dismiss the research and work of many brilliant men and women over time. What I'm trying to say is that the actual situation will never be encompassed by the waking mind. So you can forget about models. Models have nothing to do with it. We can learn things and techniques and so on from others, and that's important. But never take the model for the infinite extent of that toward which it points. And never believe that the model encompasses that toward which it points, because that is never, I think, almost never true. There might be some trivial instances in which it can be. They're not worth exploring at the moment. So yeah, today I just feel this incredible gratitude for the reawakening of some of my inspiration and the return of some of the richness of my dreaming experience. And I think another thing that I find interesting about dreaming, and also about our minds and our faculties. Um, our minds and their faculties and their abilities is that when we talk about them, they listen. We talk about the dreaming mind, so to speak. If we think of it, if I frame it in this language, it's hearing, it knows we're talking about it while we're over here on the other side of consciousness, awake. And it responds to being paid attention, right? Because there is a kind of, in most of us, a very severe division in consciousness between the waking aspects of consciousness and the sleeping and dreaming aspects. And though they are intimately bound together, many of the waking aspects would summarily destroy the other ones if they could get away with it. Which would be terribly unfortunate, since the other ones are the origin of those waking aspects. Moment to moment, not just historically or over time. So I encourage you to explore the possibilities of your human incarnation, particularly with your attention on the aspects you trust as being most noble or virtuous, most beautiful, most trustworthy. For there is a path back upstream within us and within our relationships as well, toward our homeland, the place from whence our essences arise. The origin place, where our original family yet dwells. Thank you for joining me. Grateful to have this opportunity to share and wonder and learn together again. And I hope we shall have more soon. Bye for now.